Amy Torres pressed her face against the cold metal of the observation deck window. The stars looked different out here, so far from Earth that the constellations meant nothing. Her breath fogged the glass as she watched the endless void, searching for something her instruments had detected 3 hours ago. The research ship New Horizon drifted quietly through space. Its small crew of 6 focused on their mission to catalog new worlds at the edge of human territory. Amy had volunteered for this assignment because she wanted to be the first to discover alien life. She never imagined that alien life would discover her first. "Amy, you need to see this." The voice belonged to Tom, the ship's communications officer. His usually calm demeanor had cracked, revealing something close to panic. Amy floated through the ship's narrow corridors, her magnetic boots clicking against the metal floor. The New Horizon was not built for comfort. Every space served a purpose, and luxury was a waste of weight and power. She found Tom hunched over his station, headphones pressed against his ears. "What is it?" Amy asked, settling into the chair. Beside him, Tom played the recording. Static filled the air, then something else. A pattern. Not random noise, but organized sound that repeated every 47 seconds. The signal was weak, but definitely artificial. "It's coming from Sector 7, Tom said, pointing at his screen. "About 2 light hours away. The pattern suggests distress, but the technology is nothing like ours." Amy felt her heart race. After 6 months in empty space, cataloging dead rocks and gas clouds, they had found something alive. Something intelligent. "Wake, everyone," she ordered. "Plot a course for the signal source." Captain Rivers emerged from his quarters 20 minutes later, still pulling on his uniform. He was a practical man who followed regulations, and regulations were clear about unknown contacts. "We should report this to Command first," Rivers said, studying the signal data. "Wait for instructions." Amy shook her head. "By the time Command responds, we could lose the signal. This could be first contact." "Captain, we can't let bureaucracy get in the way of history." The other crew members gathered around the small table that served as their meeting room. Beth, their engineer, looked excited. Marcus, the pilot, seemed nervous. Dr. Paul, their medic, just looked tired. "It could be dangerous," Rivers warned. "Unknown technology, unknown intentions. Or it could be someone who needs help," Amy countered. "The signal pattern suggests distress. We're the only human ship in this sector. If we don't investigate, who will?" Rivers studied the faces around the table. Amy could see him weighing. Duty against discovery, safety against the chance to make history. Finally, he nodded. "We investigate, but carefully. Full scans before we get too close. Any sign of hostility, and we jump back to safe distance immediately." The New Horizon changed course, its fusion engines pushing them toward the unknown signal. Amy spent the next 8 hours running every scan she could think of. The signal grew stronger as they approached, and the pattern became more complex. Definitely artificial. Definitely intelligent. "Contact on sensors," Marcus announced. "It's big. Bigger than anything we've ever built." The main screen flickered to life, showing their destination. Amy gasped. The ship hung in space like a living thing. Its hull curved and organic-looking. Strange lights pulsed along its surface in patterns that reminded Amy of nerve impulses. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "No response to our communications," Tom reported. "The distress signal is still broadcasting, but they're not answering our calls." Amy studied the alien vessel on the screen. It looked damaged. Scorch marks ran along one side and several sections appeared to be missing. She could see atmosphere venting from small holes in the hull. "They might not be able to respond," she said. "Their communications could be damaged. We should get closer." Rivers nodded reluctantly. "Take us in, Marcus. Nice and slow." The New Horizon crept toward the alien ship. Amy counted at least 50 different hull materials, each serving a purpose she couldn't guess. The ship was enormous, easily 10 times larger than their own vessel. If it held a crew proportional to its size, thousands of beings might be trapped. "Inside," I'm detecting life signs, Amy announced, her voice filled with excitement. Dozens of them. They're alive in there. Any signs of technology that could threaten us? Rivers asked. Beth shook her head. Nothing active. Whatever weapons they have, they're either damaged or powered down. Amy felt a thrill run through her. This was it. The moment humanity had dreamed about since first looking at the stars. First contact with an alien civilization. She would be remembered forever as one of the people who changed everything. The alien ship suddenly came alive. Lights blazed across its hull, and the distress signal stopped. Amy watched in fascination as sections of the ship began to move, reconfiguring themselves in ways that defied her understanding of engineering. It's not damaged, Beth whispered. It was pretending to be damaged. The trap closed with mechanical precision. Energy fields surrounded the New Horizon, cutting off their engines and weapons. Tractor beams locked onto their hull, pulling them toward an opening that had appeared in the alien ship's side. "Evasive maneuvers!" Rivers shouted, but it was too late. Amy watched helplessly as their ship was drawn inside the alien vessel. The opening sealed behind them, cutting off their view of space. Emergency lights bathed everything in red as their systems failed one by one. "All stop," Marcus reported. "We're caught." The alien ship's interior defied description. The walls seemed to pulse with their own life, and the air glowed with a faint phosphorescence. Their captors appeared moments later, and Amy understood, with horrible clarity, that she had made a terrible mistake. The beings were tall and thin, with too many joints in their arms and legs. Their skin had a metallic sheen, and their eyes glowed with cold intelligence. They moved with predatory grace, and the devices they carried were clearly weapons. Amy had wanted to be the first human to meet alien life, as the creatures surrounded her crew. She realized she might also be among the last. The creatures moved like liquid death through the corridors of the New Horizon. Amy pressed herself against the wall, heart hammering as she watched them secure her crew with devices that wrapped around their limbs like living metal. The aliens communicated in clicks and whistles that hurt her ears, but their intentions were clear enough. Captain Rivers tried to maintain dignity as the restraints tightened around his wrists. "I am Captain David Rivers of the Earth vessel New Horizon. We came in response to your distress signal. We mean no harm." The tallest of the creatures tilted its head, studying Rivers like a scientist examining a curious insect. When it spoke, the words came through a translation device attached to its throat. The voice was cold and precise. "I am Commander Vorth of the Kethari Empire. Your species is unknown to us. This presents an opportunity for study." Amy watched in horror as the aliens began separating her crew members. Tom was dragged away first, his protests echoing through the ship until they suddenly stopped. Beth followed, then Marcus. Each time, the sounds from deeper in the alien ship grew more terrible. Dr. Paul looked at Amy with desperate eyes as they came for him. "Remember us," he whispered. "Tell Earth what happened here." Amy wanted to scream, wanted to fight, but the alien technology held her as firmly as steel chains. She could only watch as her friends disappeared one by one into the depths of the alien vessel. Commander Vorth studied her with those glowing eyes. "You are different from the others. Your biological readings show elevated stress but also determination. Fascinating." "Let them go," Amy said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Take me instead. Study me. But let them go home." "Home?" Vorth made a sound that might have been laughter. "Your species interests me. In our experience, most civilizations beg for their own lives when faced with our methods. You offer yourself for others. This requires investigation." The alien ship was vast beyond anything Amy could have imagined. Her captors carried her through corridors that stretched for kilometers, past chambers filled with technology she couldn't begin to understand. Worst of all were the other chambers, the ones with transparent walls that showed the remains of dozens of different species, trophies from other first contacts that had ended in horror. They brought her to a laboratory that reeked of chemicals and death. The walls were lined with instruments that looked more like torture devices than scientific equipment. In the center of the room sat a chair that immediately reminded Amy of an electric chair, but far more sophisticated and infinitely more terrifying. The Cathari Empire has encountered 47 different intelligent species, Vorth explained as his subordinates secured Amy to the chair. Each taught us something about the nature of life and death. Your species will contribute to this. Knowledge. Amy struggled against the restraints, but they adapted to her movements, tightening when she pulled and loosening just enough to prevent circulation loss. The chair itself seemed alive, with tendrils that connected to her nervous system and monitored her vital signs. "What do you want to know?" Amy asked, hoping to buy time or find some way to reason with her captors. "Everything," Vorth replied. "Pain tolerance, breaking point, survival instincts, psychological responses to trauma, your species' capacity for hope and despair, how long you can maintain consciousness under extreme duress." The first wave of agony hit Amy like lightning made flesh. Every nerve in her body screamed at once, and she bit through her tongue trying not to give Vorth the satisfaction of hearing her scream. But the pain was designed to be beyond human endurance, calibrated to push her past every limit her species had evolved. Through the haze of torment, Amy could hear Vorth dictating notes to his assistants. Her pain was data to be collected, her suffering just another line in their research. The aliens had perfected torture to the level of science, with instruments that could cause unimaginable agony while keeping their subjects conscious and aware. "Remarkable pain tolerance," Vorth observed as Amy finally succumbed and screamed. "Significantly higher than the Zalari. Note the delayed vocal response and continued motor function despite neural overload." Time became meaningless in the laboratory. Amy drifted in and out of consciousness as the aliens tested every limit of human endurance. They broke her bones and watched them try to heal. They stopped her heart and restarted it to study her cardiovascular responses. They pushed needles into her brain to see how she reacted to different types of neural stimulation. Through it all, Amy held on to one thought. Earth had to be warned. Humanity had to know about the Cathari Empire before more ships ventured into deep space. Her crew was already dead. She was certain of that. But maybe their sacrifice could save others. "Interesting," Vorth murmured, studying readouts that Amy couldn't see. "Subject maintains focused thought patterns despite extreme trauma. Most species enter delirium by this point." Amy tried to speak, but her throat was too damaged. Blood filled her mouth, and she could feel her body shutting down system by system. The aliens' instruments beeped frantically as her vital signs collapsed. "Fascinating," Vorth said, leaning closer. "The human maintains consciousness even as biological functions cease. Record everything." Amy's vision faded to black. Her last thought was of Earth, a blue marble spinning in space, unaware of the predators that hunted in the darkness between stars. She hoped someone would find the New Horizons flight recorder. She hoped the warning would reach home in time. Her heart stopped beating. Her brain activity ceased. The monitors attached to her body showed flat lines across every reading. Amy. Torres was dead. Commander Vorth checked his chronometer and made a note. Subject expired after 37 minutes of continuous testing. Durability exceeded estimates by 12%. Prepare the body for dissection. The assistants began, disconnecting the monitoring equipment. Vorth turned away to dictate his final observations, satisfied with the data they had collected. The human had been more resilient than expected, but ultimately just as mortal as every other species they had encountered. Behind him, unnoticed by anyone in the laboratory, Amy's eyes snapped open. Her heart began to beat again with strong, steady rhythm. Her brain activity surged back to life, showing patterns more complex than before. The wounds that had killed her began to close. Tissue, regenerating at an impossible rate. Amy Torres drew her first breath in over an hour, and the sound echoed through the alien laboratory like thunder. The laboratory fell silent, except for the steady beeping of monitors that should have been showing flat lines. Amy felt consciousness return like sunrise after an endless night. Every sensation was sharper now, every color more vivid. She could hear conversations in distant parts of the alien ship, smell chemical compounds that had no names in any human language, and feel electromagnetic fields humming through the walls. Commander Vorth spun around, his glowing eyes wide with something Amy had never seen in them before, genuine surprise. The other Cathari in the room stepped backward, their clicking speech rapid and agitated. "Impossible," Vorth whispered, approaching the chair where Amy sat fully healed and very much alive. All biological functions ceased. Brain activity terminated. "You were dead for 63 minutes?" Amy looked down at her hands, turning them over in amazement. Every wound had vanished. Every broken bone had mended. Even the small scars she had carried since childhood were gone, leaving her skin unmarked and perfect. More importantly, the crushing fear that had consumed her during the torture was absent, replaced by a strange calm that felt as natural as breathing. "I remember dying," Amy said, her voice clear and strong. "I remember the pain stopping. I remember something else." Vorth gestured frantically to his assistants, who began attaching new monitoring equipment to Amy's body. "Describe this something else. What did you experience during death?" Amy closed her eyes, trying to capture memories that felt like trying to hold smoke. "Darkness at first, then light, but not light like we know it. And voices speaking in harmonics that bypassed my ears entirely. They were old, ancient beyond measure. The monitoring equipment showed readings that made the Cathari exchange alarmed glances. Amy's brain activity was off the charts, showing patterns they had never encountered in any species. Her physical responses were equally unprecedented, with reflexes testing at superhuman levels. "We will repeat the experiment," Vorth declared, his scientific curiosity overriding any caution. "Identical parameters, identical duration." This time, Amy knew what was coming. The pain struck with the same devastating force, but her perception of it had changed. She could feel her body's responses, analyze the damage being done, even appreciate the sophisticated cruelty of the Cathari instruments. The agony was still overwhelming, but it no longer controlled her mind. She died again after exactly 37 minutes, her body succumbing to trauma that would have killed any human instantly. Vorth and his team documented everything from her final heartbeat to the moment her neural activity ceased entirely. An hour later, Amy returned to life. This resurrection was different from the first. As consciousness flowed back into her restored body, Amy felt connections forming in her mind that had never existed before. She could understand fragments of the Cathari language without translation. She could sense the electronic patterns flowing through their equipment. Most disturbing of all, she could feel other minds in the distance, human minds crying out in pain and fear. "There are more of us," Amy said, sitting up on the examination table. "More humans. I can feel them." Vorth's excitement was palpable. "Where? How many? What do you sense?" Amy concentrated, letting her expanded awareness reach out across space. The sensations were overwhelming at first, like trying to drink from a fire hose, but gradually she learned to filter and focus. "Hundreds," she whispered. "Maybe thousands, scattered across the galaxy. Most don't know what they are, but some—" She paused, her expression growing troubled. "Some are awakening. The pain is triggering something that was always inside us." The third death came sooner than expected. Vorth, driven by scientific fervor, pushed the experiments further, using instruments designed for species far more durable than baseline humans. Amy's body couldn't withstand the enhanced torture protocols, and she died in 23 minutes instead of 37. But she returned stronger than before. During her fourth resurrection, Amy's eyes began to glow with the same phosphorescent light that illuminated the alien ship. When she touched the monitoring equipment, it responded to her will instead of its programming. Several delicate instruments overloaded and exploded in showers of sparks. Fascinating, Vorth breathed, apparently untroubled by the destruction of his equipment. Each resurrection creates measurable improvements in physical and mental capacity. The subject is evolving in real time. Amy barely heard him. Her consciousness was expanding beyond the confines of the laboratory, reaching out through space to touch other awakening minds. She could feel them now, humans across dozens of worlds who were beginning to change. Some were prisoners like herself, tortured by various alien species. Others were slaves, workers, or simply explorers who had encountered the wrong civilizations. All of them were dying and returning, growing stronger with each resurrection. "We're not alone," Amy said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the translation devices malfunction. "Humanity is not what we thought we were." The fifth death was the worst yet. Vorth had brought in specialists from other parts of the ship, experts in xenobiology who wanted to understand the resurrection mechanism. They dissected Amy while she was still alive, studying her organs as they failed and her brain as it shut down. The violation felt worse than the physical agony. But when she returned this time, Amy was no longer entirely human. Her resurrection sent ripples through space that other awakened humans felt like earthquake tremors in their minds. Somewhere on a mining world, a human slave named David suddenly found himself immune to the alien weapons used to control him. On a research station orbiting a distant star, a human scientist named Lisa discovered she could interface directly with alien computers through touch alone. "The network is growing," Amy told her captors, though she wasn't sure they could understand her anymore. Her voice carried frequencies that made their translation devices smoke and spark. "Every death makes us stronger. Every resurrection connects us to something larger." Vorth leaned forward, his excitement overriding any concern for his malfunctioning equipment. "What is this something larger? What are you connecting to?" Amy smiled, and the expression held knowledge that no baseline human had ever possessed. "Our parents," she said simply. "The ones who scattered us across the stars to grow and learn. They left safeguards in our genetics, protocols that would activate if we ever faced extinction." The sixth death changed everything. This time, when Amy died, her consciousness didn't fade into darkness. Instead, she found herself in a place that existed between dimensions, where ancient minds waited with infinite patience. They had been human once, eons ago, before they transcended physical form and seeded the galaxy with their children. They had watched their descendants spread across countless worlds, developing in isolation, growing strong through diversity and struggle. But they had also watched the rise of predator species like the Cathari, civilizations that viewed other life as nothing more than resources to be consumed. The ancient protocols were designed for exactly this situation, triggered when humanity faced systematic extermination. Amy was not the first to awaken. She was simply the first to die enough times to make contact with the vast intelligence that guided their evolution. When she returned to life for the sixth time, she carried a message that would change everything. The age of humanity's childhood was ending. The time of awakening had begun, and across the galaxy, the Cathari Empire was about to discover that they had not been hunting prey. They had been waking up something that had been sleeping for millions of years, waiting for the right moment to reclaim their inheritance among the stars. Amy no longer needed the monitoring equipment to understand what was happening to her body. She could feel every cell as it reconstructed itself, every neural pathway as it formed new connections that had never existed in baseline humanity. The seventh resurrection brought with it memories that belonged to someone else, someone who had lived and died millions of years before Earth's sun had even formed. Commander Vorth had called in more specialists, turning the laboratory into a crowded theater of scientific observation. Cathari researchers from across the Empire monitored Amy's impossible returns to life, documenting abilities that challenged everything they understood about biology and death. Subject demonstrates complete cellular regeneration within standard time parameters, one specialist reported in rapid clicking speech. Genetic structures show active modification at the quantum level. This should be impossible according to known physics. Amy sat quietly on the examination table, letting them take their measurements while her consciousness expanded across the galaxy. She could feel the network growing stronger every hour. Humans were awakening on worlds whose names existed only in alien languages, triggered by trauma inflicted by dozens of different predator species. On the slave world of Kepler Prime, a human named Robert discovered he could survive in the vacuum of space after his alien masters threw him out an airlock for disobedience. On the research station orbiting Proxima 7, a woman named Helen found she could read the thoughts of her alien captors simply by touching them. Each awakening sent ripples through the network, strengthening the connection between scattered members of humanity. "Tell me about these others you sense," Vorth demanded, his excitement making his voice rise to frequencies that hurt Amy's enhanced hearing. "How many have this ability? What triggers the transformation?" Amy looked at him with eyes that now held depths Vorth couldn't fathom. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made the air itself vibrate in ways that bypassed the aliens' translation devices and spoke directly to their minds. "You don't understand what you've done," she said. "For millions of years, humanity has been sleeping. We forgot what we were, scattered ourselves across the galaxy to grow in isolation and diversity. But the awakening protocols were always there, waiting for the right trigger." She stood up from the table, and the restraints that had held her for days simply fell away, their alien alloys unable to maintain molecular cohesion in her presence. Several Cathari stepped backward, their weapons drawn but useless against someone who could manipulate matter at the subatomic level. "The trigger is extinction pressure combined with genuine altruism," Amy continued, walking slowly around the laboratory. Every piece of equipment she passed began to resonate in sympathy with her bioelectric field. Most species develop survival instincts focused on individual preservation, but humans who willingly sacrifice themselves for others, who face death to save their people, they activate something deeper. Vorth's scientific mind was still working despite his growing fear. "The resurrection ability is hereditary, present in all your species?" "Not ability," Amy corrected. "Remember. We're remembering what we forgot when we chose to become mortal, chose to experience growth through limitation and struggle. Every human carries the genetic memory of what we once were. The eighth death came not from Vorth's instruments, but from Amy herself. She placed her hand on one of the power conduits feeding the laboratory and drew enough electricity through her body to stop an elephant's heart. The Cathari watched in fascination as she died voluntarily, her vital signs flatlining in perfect synchronization. But this resurrection was different from all the others. When Amy's eyes opened 37 minutes later, they held knowledge that made Vorth's advanced civilization look like children playing with fire. "I've seen the archive," Amy said, her voice now carrying frequencies that existed in dimensions beyond normal space. "The memories of the predecessors, the first humans who chose transcendence over physical existence. I know what you've really done by torturing us." She gestured, and the laboratory's walls became transparent, revealing the vast interior of the Cathari ship. But Amy's vision penetrated further, showing star systems where other awakening humans were beginning to understand their heritage. Your empire has been systematically triggering the awakening for 3,000 years, Amy said. Every species you've tortured, every civilization you've destroyed. You've been searching for the ones who would fight back not for themselves, but for others. You've been looking for us without knowing it. Vorth's excitement had transformed into something resembling terror. The predecessors are legend, ancient myths about a race that ruled the galaxy before the rise of current civilizations. Not myths, Amy replied. History. We ruled through compassion rather than conquest, guided younger species toward enlightenment rather than exploitation. When we saw that our presence was preventing other races from reaching their full potential, we chose to step aside. She touched the wall of the laboratory, and her consciousness flowed through the ship's computer systems like water through a sieve. Every file, every record, every piece of data the Cathari had collected over millennia became accessible to her. But we left safeguards, Amy continued, scattered our children across the galaxy with genetic locks that would open when they faced extinction. We knew that someday the younger races would develop predator civilizations like yours. We knew our children would need to remember what they were. The 9th resurrection was the last one Amy would need. When she died this time, her consciousness didn't return to the laboratory at all. Instead, she found herself in communion with thousands of other awakened humans spread across hundreds of worlds. They were all connected now, their individual, minds forming nodes in a vast intelligence that spanned the galaxy. When her body healed and her eyes opened, Amy Torres was no longer just one person. She was the local representative of something that the Cathari Empire had spent 3 millennia accidentally creating. A network of awakened humans who remembered what their species had been before they chose mortality. The resurrection phase is ending, Amy announced, her voice now speaking in harmonics that the Cathari could understand without translation devices. We've remembered enough. Now comes the next phase. Vorth pressed himself against the far wall of the laboratory, his scientific curiosity finally overwhelmed by primal fear. What is the next phase? Amy smiled, and the expression held the weight of cosmic justice. Correction, she said simply. For 3,000 years, your empire has spread across the galaxy like a cancer, destroying civilizations and torturing entire species into extinction. You've ruled through fear and cruelty, believing that strength came from the ability to inflict suffering. She raised her hand, and throughout the Cathari ship, systems began to respond to her will rather than their programming. Weapons powered down. Life support systems optimized themselves for human rather than alien physiology. Navigation computers began plotting courses that would take the ship not toward Cathari space, but toward Earth. You were wrong, Amy said as she walked toward the laboratory door. Strength comes from the willingness to sacrifice for others. And now, after 3 millennia of accidentally awakening the children of the predecessors, you're about to learn what real strength looks like. Behind her, the Cathari scientists huddled together in terror as their greatest weapon, their most advanced ship, their perfect instruments of torture and domination, all began to serve the will of someone they had killed 10 times over. The age of Cathari dominance was ending, and they had no one to blame but themselves. Amy walked through the corridors of the Cathari ship, like a force of nature given human form. The alien crew pressed themselves against the walls as she passed, their weapons useless against someone who could restructure matter with a thought. The ship itself seemed to recognize her authority, with systems responding to her will before she even consciously commanded them. She found the bridge at the heart of the vessel, a crystalline chamber filled with displays that showed the scope of the Cathari Empire. Star maps revealed hundreds of conquered worlds, shipping routes that transported slaves between systems, and military installations that enforced the Empire's brutal rule across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. The bridge crew had prepared for her arrival. Dozens of Cathari warriors stood ready with weapons designed to kill gods, but Amy barely noticed them. Her attention was focused on the communication array at the center of the chamber, a device capable of reaching every corner of Cathari space. "Stand down," she said, and the command carried such weight that several aliens immediately dropped their weapons. "I'm not here to destroy you. I'm here to give you a chance to change." Commander Vorth had followed her from the laboratory, his scientific mind still struggling to process what he had witnessed. "You could kill us all," he said. "Why don't you?" Amy turned to face him, and he saw in her expression something that no Cathari had ever truly understood: compassion for one's enemies. "Because that's not what we are," she replied. "The predecessors didn't rule through fear. They guided through example." She approached the communication array, and her touch transformed it from a tool of Cathari dominance into something far more sophisticated. The device began broadcasting on frequencies that existed in dimensions beyond normal space, carrying her message not just to Cathari worlds, but to every planet where humans had been scattered. "This is Amy Torres," she said, her voice now reaching across the galaxy in an instant. "To all humans who can hear this transmission, the time of awakening has come. You are not alone. You are not weak. You are the children of the predecessors, and your true heritage is calling you home. On worlds whose names were known only to their alien conquerors." Humans suddenly felt the message resonate in their genetic memory. Slaves working in the mines of distant asteroids looked up from their labors as power they had never imagined flowed through their bodies. Prisoners in alien detention centers found that their captors' weapons could no longer harm them. Amy's message continued, reaching every human consciousness in the galaxy. "The resurrection protocols have been activated. Those who have already awakened, share your knowledge with others. Those who haven't, know that the change will come when you need it most. Remember what we were. Remember what we can be again." But the transmission wasn't meant only for human ears. Every alien civilization in the galaxy heard Amy's words, translated automatically into their native languages by technology that transcended their understanding. "To the species that have conquered human worlds, enslaved human populations, or committed acts of cruelty against my people, your reign of terror is ending. We do not seek revenge, but we will not tolerate injustice. Release those you have captured. Cease your predations. Learn to coexist, or face the consequences of your actions." Commander Vorth watched his empire's communication network light up with reports from across Cathari space. Human slaves were simply walking away from their bondage, immune to the weapons. Their overseers turned on them. Human prisoners were dissolving the walls of their cells with touch alone. Worst of all, the humans weren't fighting back with violence. They were simply leaving, taking with them the knowledge and skills that had made their enslavement profitable. "This is impossible," Vorth whispered. "One species cannot challenge the natural order of the galaxy." Amy smiled at his denial. "Watch," she said simply. The ship's displays showed real-time intelligence from across the galaxy. On the manufacturing world of Zerion Prime, human workers had walked out of the factories that produced Cathari weapons, taking with them the technical expertise that kept the production lines running. On the agricultural planet Verdania, human laborers had simply vanished from the fields, leaving behind crops that would rot without their knowledge of advanced farming techniques. But the most devastating reports came from the research stations, where Cathari scientists had been studying human physiology. On dozens of worlds, human test subjects were simply walking out of their laboratories, their bodies immune to the containment systems designed to hold them. "Your empire was built on the exploitation of conquered species," Amy explained as the reports continued to flow in. "Humans weren't your most numerous slaves, but we were often your most valuable. We learned your technologies, managed your complex systems, solved problems that your own people couldn't handle." She gestured at the displays showing factory worlds grinding to a halt and research stations going dark. "Now we're simply leaving, and we're taking our knowledge with us." The transformation was accelerating across the galaxy. Every human who heard Amy's message felt the genetic locks opening, awakening abilities that had been dormant for millions of years. They could interface directly with alien technology, understand languages they had never heard, and most importantly, survive conditions that would kill baseline humans. But Amy's greatest revelation came when she touched the ship's historical database and accessed records dating back 3,000 years. What she found there changed her understanding of everything that had happened. "You weren't just accidentally awakening us," she told Vorth, her voice carrying the weight of cosmic revelation. "Your entire empire was designed for this purpose. The predecessors programmed your species' development 3 million years ago." Vorth's eyes widened in disbelief. "That's impossible. The Cathari evolved naturally on our homeworld." Amy accessed deeper levels of the historical database, revealing genetic patterns that no Cathari scientist had ever been able to explain. "You evolved to be predators, yes, but predators with a very specific purpose. Your instincts drive you to seek out and torture beings who show altruistic behavior. You're compelled to test their willingness to sacrifice for others." The terrible truth unfolded on the ship's displays. The Cathari Empire hadn't risen to dominance through superior technology or military might. They had been guided by genetic programming so subtle that even their most advanced scientists had never detected it. Every expansion of their empire, every act of cruelty, every systematic torture of captured populations had been orchestrated by modifications made to their DNA before their species had even developed intelligence. "You're a testing mechanism," Amy continued, her tone filled with something approaching pity. "The predecessors needed a way to ensure that their scattered children would awaken only when they truly embodied humanity's highest ideals, so they created you to be the crucible that would forge us back into what we once were." Across the galaxy, the awakening reached a critical threshold. Thousands of humans were now fully conscious of their heritage, their individual minds forming nodes, in a vast network of intelligence that spanned star systems. They began appearing on worlds where no human had ever set foot, materializing through dimensional technologies that made faster-than-light travel look primitive. On the Cathari homeworld itself, awakened humans appeared in the halls of government and the chambers of military command. They came not as conquerors, but as teachers, offering knowledge that could transform Cathari civilization from predators into partners in galactic development. "This is your chance," Amy told Vorth, as reports of peaceful contact flooded in from across the Empire. "Your species was created to test us, but that doesn't mean you're doomed to remain predators forever. The genetic programming can be overwritten. You can choose to evolve beyond your original purpose." Some Cathari accepted the offer. On the industrial world of Nexus 7, human teachers worked alongside reformed Cathari scientists to develop technologies that could heal entire ecosystems. On the military base of Terminus Station, former warriors learned to use their strategic minds for exploration rather than conquest. But others resisted. On a dozen worlds, Cathari commanders refused to believe that their empire could simply end. They activated ancient weapons, planet killers, that had been held in reserve for the ultimate crisis. The energy beams that could sterilize entire continents lanced out toward human populations. The weapons had no effect. The awakened humans simply absorbed the destructive energy and converted it into pure light that illuminated their worlds like miniature suns. Where the planet killers struck, gardens bloomed, and new cities rose from the transformed matter. Amy felt every attempt at resistance through the network. Each act of violence met with an overwhelming response of creation and healing. This was the true power of awakened humanity. Not the ability to destroy, but the power to transform destruction itself into something beautiful. "It's over," she told Vorth, as the last Cathari weapons fell silent across the galaxy. "Your empire is finished, but your species doesn't have to be. We're offering you something your people have never had, the chance to build instead of destroy." The final transformation came when Amy touched the ship's navigation computer and set course for Earth. But this wasn't a return home for one person. This was the beginning of a great gathering as awakened humans from across the galaxy began converging on humanity's birth world. "I need to warn my people," Amy said, though she knew the warning would come too late to matter. "They need to know what we've become, what's coming home to them." She accessed Earth's communication networks through quantum entanglement fields that bypassed the speed of light entirely. Her message reached every human government, every military installation, every research facility on the planet simultaneously. "This is Dr. Amy Torres of the research vessel New Horizon," she said. "I'm returning to Earth, but I'm not the same person who left. None of us are. Humanity is about to reclaim its birthright among the stars, and our world is about to become the center of a new galactic civilization built on compassion rather than conquest." The response from Earth was immediate and chaotic. Military forces mobilized to repel an alien invasion that would never come. Scientists struggled to understand technologies that transcended their current understanding of physics. World leaders demanded explanations for phenomena that couldn't be explained, in terms they could comprehend. But children across Earth looked up at the night sky and smiled, feeling in their genetic memory the approaching return of family they had never known they had. The awakening was coming home, and with it would come wonders that would transform not just humanity, but every species in the galaxy willing to embrace a future built on cooperation rather than conquest. Amy Torres had left Earth as a xenobiologist searching for alien life. She was returning as the herald of humanity's transformation into something the galaxy had not seen for millions of years, a species powerful enough to rule through love rather than fear. The age of the predecessors was beginning again, and this time they would not withdraw when their children were ready to stand on their own. This time, they would guide the galaxy together into a future where every species could reach its full potential without fear of predators lurking in the darkness between stars.